The Edgar Cayce Handbook for Creating Your Future by Mark Thurston and Christopher Fazel. Principle number 5. Live for a purpose greater than yourself. What's in it for me? This has become a frequent question, even a mantra for modern civilization. Almost everywhere you look, you can find this mode of operating. Television commercials tell us to look out for number one or encourage us to buy certain products because I'm worth it. The scramble for personal advancement and the unrest it creates are dramatized continually on the daytime and evening soaps. Their call to arms is, do unto others before they do unto you. Is this an expression of our real nature? At the center of our being, are we beasts of prey operating only from the primal law of nature, survival of the fittest? Or are we sparks from the creative force whose nature is to give and love, to seek harmony, balance, and healing for all parts of creation? Some would say that the jury is still out on that question. Others would say that the question itself is naive, that the human race appears to be made up of self-seeking splinters warring constantly among themselves with their environment. But you have to be careful when looking at the evidence. Notice the major trends that define human nature, but examine also the small personal examples that often go unnoticed by the world at large. One man recounted a childhood memory that had forever shaped his impression of human character. He had grown up in traditional small-town USA, as was typical. He earned his spending money by delivering newspapers in his neighborhood, and in the early 1960s, it was customary for paperboys to go from customer to customer once a week and collect the weekly delivery fee. One October evening, during his collecting rounds, the boy knocked on the door of a neighbor a few houses down from his own home. The woman who lived there came to the door in tears. She spoke rather incoherently, but the boy was able to make out that she had just learned of the sudden death of one of her own grown children. Being no more than 12 or so, the boy had no idea what to say or do. But when he returned home, he found his mother, who was busily working in the kitchen, and told her what had happened. Upon hearing the news, his mother immediately quit what she was doing, threw on her coat, hurried over to the neighbor to provide company and solace. She didn't think about it. She didn't say, gosh, I should go comfort her, but what would I say? She just went. This story would never have made the evening news. Woman drops everything and runs to the aid of a neighbor. But to the boy who had felt so incapable of action, this was a most impressive example of human compassion and selflessness. The two faces of humankind. Religions and philosophies through the ages have struggled to define the relationship between the two opposing natures of humankind. The selfish, me-first nature, and the nature that places concern for another even before one's own safety. For example, in the pagan pantheon of the ancient Romans, there existed the two-faced god Janus, one head with two images facing in the opposite directions. The very story of the Buddha's enlightenment centers on this overcoming the two demons of selfishness, fear, and desire. The Christian Jesus overcame the world by offering himself in love and resisting the temptation to save his own life. It's this same Jesus who tells his followers, no one can serve two masters, Matthew 6:24. The philosophy found in the Cayce readings replays the same theme. One proverb found in several variations throughout the readings says, in effect, that we approach the throne of grace leaning on the arm of another, whom we have helped. One reading is even more emphatic, saying that no one gets to heaven unless he or she is leaning on such an arm. In other words, attitudes and actions based on a genuine concern for someone or something greater than yourself actually leads you to the ultimate destiny, identification with the creative force of the universe. This is your true self. But this crown is won only at a price. It takes courage to free yourself from the prison of egocenteredness, from the conviction that your good is based on someone else's loss, or that life is, in essence, survival of the fittest. Myth as teacher. Mythologies throughout the world describe this heroic struggle. Every culture tells the story in its own way, but in every case, the purpose in telling the myth is to awaken in the listener a set of values that goes beyond pure self-interest. The hero or heroine lives for a bigger purpose than self-concern. For example, the Sumerian hero Gilgamesh suffered through a painful quest to win for humankind the sign of immortality, the plant, never grow old. He risked many dangers, finally diving to the bottom of the sea to retrieve this gift. His quest failed. However, when his treasure was eaten by a serpent, Prometheus was chained to a rock and tortured because he brought a gift of fire to the human race. His story is the classic theme of fire theft. In stealing fire from the gods and bestowing it upon humanity, he gave us the gift of civilization. Yet in so doing, he aroused the wrath of the gods and suffered their revenge. In a modern rendition of this timeless theme, J.R. Tolkien, Hobbit Frodo risked life and limb to undo the evil that was forged into a magic ring. His quest was to steal into the heart of the evil empire of Sauron and cast the ring into the volcanic furnace of Mount Doom. Only such an act could undo the plague of evil that was threatening to engulf Middle-earth. In the psychic readings of Edgar Cayce, a new mythology unfolds. Although its setting may seem fanciful, the themes illustrate brilliantly the struggle between selfish and living for a greater purpose. To do this, Cayce whisks us back to the lost continent of Atlantis. There, in the midst of prehistory, he describes an almost superhuman civilization, divided into two opposing forces. On one side are the sons of Belial. On the other are the children of the Law of One. These two groups disagree on the fundamental issues of life. The sons of Belial can see no purpose in life other than self-aggrandizement and self-indulgence. The children of the Law of One, in contrast, conceive of life as an opportunity to measure up to the standards of caring and loving. The chief focus of contention between these two groups was a third class of beings who were in a dulled state of consciousness. They were a type of sub-race, souls who were trapped unconsciously in physical form. The sons of Belial wanted to keep these dulled, vulnerable beings in their inferior state and use them for slave labor. The children of the Law of One wanted to elevate the condition of these trapped souls and raise them to their full potential, to redeem them as it were. In this vivid myth, Cayce illustrates the fundamental questions that face us today, both as individuals and as members of the human race. Are we to live only for ourselves, using others to our advantage? Or are we to care about someone or something beyond ourselves? The first choice may lead to a greater comfort and convenience, at least temporarily. The second calls for the definite inconvenience of taking on the burdens of others. Yet the Cayce readings, the ancient mythologies, and the great world religions all agree that only the second choice leads to happiness. One argument surfaces periodically under self versus selfishness. One argument surfaces periodically contending that all morality is based on selfishness. You've heard this assertion from the Greek sophists as well as from the philosophy set forth in such modern books as Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead of Ayn Rand, by Ayn Rand. If doing a good deed makes you happy, the argument postulates, then you are doing it to be happy. And that action is indicative of a selfish motive. Therefore, being kind is no more virtuous than being cruel. Both are done for the pleasant sensation they bring. Such a point of view, however, fails to grasp the distinction between happiness and pleasure, between self and selfishness. It misses some of the depth of who we really are. If humanity is seen only as a complex physical organism, then the entire spectrum of human thought and action is reduced to biological terms. Happiness and pleasure become the same. However, if humanity is seen with a spiritual dimension living through the physical, but not limited to it, then the range of human potential is broadened immensely. Then we have a choice, because happiness and pleasure are no longer identical. We can live from a purely physical perspective, forever pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain, or we can choose to live according to our spiritual selves, whose nature is to care deeply and compassionately for others, even to the extent of self-sacrifice. In this thought-provoking book, Creative Brooding, Richard Raines tells the story of a band of prisoners of war held captive in a Japanese prison camp during World War II. The prisoners are outside the camp doing construction work for their captors. When this work is finished, the shovels are counted and one is missing. Furious, the captors insist that the shovel be returned and that the culprit who hid it reveal it himself. The prisoners look at each other dumbly, which only infuriates the captors more. Finally, the guard in charge shouts, all die, and prepares for a general execution of the entire work party. Then one man steps forward and announces that he took the shovel. In a fit of rage, the head guard clubs the man to death with the butt of his rifle. The work party trudges back to camp, carrying the man's body and all the tools. When they arrive in the camp, the shovels are counted again. The first count had been an error. There never had been a missing shovel. Raines appends to this story, this true story, the biblical verse, "No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends," John 15:13. Few of us are called upon to make such a heroic sacrifice, yet every day in smaller ways we have opportunities to choose between serving only the self and serving a greater purpose. What purpose to choose? What is the purpose that we are called upon to serve? How do we choose among all the missions and causes that beckon us to join? How do we know which one is best? One method for evaluating purposes is to find in the phrase, "You will know them by their fruits," Matthew 7:16. In other words, does the purpose help create greater peace, contentment, understanding, or love, or does it create strife, dissension, fear, hatred? Does this cause contribute to the common good, or does it benefit a few at the expense of others? These sorts of questions are found in the CAYCE readings that stress the importance of living by ideals. Ideals are motives, why we do something as opposed to what we do. In fact, one troubled person was told by CAYCE that the most important thing anyone can do is set a spiritual ideal and then live by it. From one point of view, there is only a single spiritual ideal for the human race, and your life can become an attempt to live according to it. But from another perspective, you have a very particular ideal, a mission with which you were born. It's a very specific purpose that no one else can fulfill as well as you can. That common spiritual ideal is probably beyond neat definitions, but it's clearly about elevating the level of quality of existence for the human race and for all of creation. This might be called the great work or the great purpose. However, we each have only our little part to play in that work. The trick is to remember that our part is important, even when it seems small. There is the story of a reporter who went to interview the builders of a New York skyscraper. He came to the three masons all working at the same job in the same place and asked each what they were doing. The first replied, "I'm laying a brick." The second replied, "I'm building a wall." But the third replied, "I'm helping to build a monument that will be admired for centuries." Is living for a purpose the same as joining a group or a movement? A purpose in life is certainly not the same as an organized cause or movement, yet often we find organizations or groups serving as vehicles for certain ideals or purposes. Joining a group or a movement is often part of living for a purpose greater than pure self-interest. Yet caution is advised. Organized movements or groups can create a strong impression of love and peace within the group while wreaking havoc on unfortunate individuals not within its embrace. The Nazi Party and the Ku Klux Klan are classic examples. As a member of such a group, one may have the impression that one is living for a greater purpose. Yet the purpose is in fact destructive, a group ego responding to the ruthless call of nature's survival of the fittest. For a group or movement to be truly in tune with the greater purpose, it must reach out to the rest of humanity, not merely for recruiting purposes, but in genuine love and compassion. The test of a group's attunement with the great ideal and the purpose is whether its efforts result in a bettering of people in general. The two-edged sword. Even a casual observation of life shows that a person can't please everyone. It's impossible rather, to perform any act without causing at least an inconvenience to someone else. For example, if you're committed to a cleaner environment and join efforts to shut down a polluting chemical plant, you contribute to the loss of jobs and livelihoods of many honest, hardworking families. Years ago, a woman was traveling through the beautiful Northern California area known as Big Sur. During one stop on the trip, she asked some local people if they knew where the famous photographer and environmentalist Ansel Adams lived. She remembered that Adams had been very active in the campaign to protect this area from industrialization. The traveler got a first-hand lesson in the paradox of positive action when the local inhabitants told her that in their opinion, Adams was not a hero but a meddler. She realized that Adams presented a threat to these people and to their delicate local economy. They didn't care what impact they made on their environment for future generations. They only wanted their jobs and factories. Begin today and make it practical. Live for a purpose greater than yourself. Now, what can you do to apply this principle? Is there some major work to accomplish? Is there a certain group or organization that provides the perfect opportunity to serve the great purpose or ideal? The answer probably is both yes and no. It's important to feel part of the great work, the work of elevating the human condition physically, mentally, spiritually. It's important and helpful to realize that this work is greater than any one person, lifetime, or even historical period. Broadening the scope of your purpose is to include the past and the future that connects you with humanity that has gone before you and that which is yet to come. Sometimes you may even feel a sense of awe at being a part of something so big and important, yet at the same time, living with your purpose must be a day-to-day and moment-to-moment experience. The great work is accomplished by the little things that are done day to day, such as running next door to provide support and comfort to a grieving neighbor. It's taking time to help a child figure out a difficult math problem. It's being kind. It's responding to your world with compassion and acting accordingly. Exercise. Do something today, probably just a small thing from which you derive no personal benefit from beyond the delight of doing it. This deed should bring you no direct financial reward, no attention or acclaim, perhaps not even words of grateful appreciation. The effort should, however, bring benefit to someone or something else, another individual or group of people, an animal, the environment, and so on. From this one small action, please note your inner responses. For example, in the process, do you encounter resistance or fear? Finally, recognize how this way of acting, even with just the small efforts, creates a feeling of connection with things greater than yourself. End of Principle 5. Stop, page 50. Next principle is number 6, and that is truth is a growing thing.